Good morning. We are live now and we will start the program. A warm welcome to webinar on future of education today. And in fact, education has seen two developments recently. One that was enforced on it due to this COVID crisis, and the education institutes quickly embrace technology as an instrument of delivery. And going forward, probably this technology usage will coexist with the physical teaching when we get back to normal. And second is the announcement of this national education policy, the new policy that has this is the first policy of the 21st century, which has covered what we call today a pre-primary stage till higher education. And a lot of reforms have been proposed, how it is going to impact the sector and how it will take the country forward and prepare the human resources. So we will have deliberations throughout the day on this thing. And we have an eminent panel of speakers from different education streams as well as consulting firms. And we will start the program with, I would request Mr. Randhir Vikram Singh, co-chairman of FICCI Rajasthan State Council and CMD of Mandava Hotels, for his welcome remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Atul. Good morning to everybody. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. G.K. Prabhu, President, Manipal University, Jaipur, Lieutenant General Surinder Kulkarni, Director, Mayo College, Ajmer, Mr. Ma'am Omar Dio, Program Specialist and Chief of Section Education, UNESCO, New Delhi, Mr. Ashok Verma, Leader, Social Sector Advisory Services, PwC India, Mr. Sunil Kumar Yadav, Chairman FICCI Rajasthan Subcommittee on HR and Skills and Vice President, Honda Cars Limited, participating delegates. COVID-19 has disrupted our lives like never before, and our education system is no exception to this. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the educational institutes across the world being compelled to certainly harness and utilize the suite of available technology tools to create contempt to remote learning for students in all sectors. Numerous e-tech firms have leveraged this opportunity to offer lessons in an interesting and interactive way to students. E-learning seems a viable solution at the moment to fill the void created due to the absence of classroom learning. Although online education cannot replace classroom education due to the personalized nature of attention and face-to-face interaction, it can be effectively supplemented to the brick and mortar models of education. It cannot. So far, e-learning has proved a boon to the urban areas. It should be further expanded to serve the rural under-reserved hinterland as well as different abled sections of the society. New age technology such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, among others, can be instrumental in bridging the crucial gaps. The ongoing COVID-19 crisis has presented an opportunity to rethink the deep-rooted classroom mode of education and undiscover the significance of online learning. It has been a great leveler as it has enabled various stakeholders to collaborate and access the gaps of shortcomings in the conventional model. The COVID-19 pandemic may be just a tip point for the reforms of the Indian education system. The new education policy 2020 represents the aspirations to becoming a knowledge powerhouse of the world, integrating the best of the global education experiments. The global education development agenda reflects in the global Goal 4, SDG 4 for 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by India in 2015 seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all by 2030. The education policy is a step in the right direction, given it's implemented throughout the long period it targets. I'm sure that we'll get a meaningful insight from today's webinar on changing the face of education and way forward. Thank you so much, everybody. Over to Atul.
Thank you, Chairman. And now I would request Mr. Ashok Verma, who is leader of Social Sector Advisory Services of PwC India. In fact, we are happy that he is with us for the second time in quick succession. He was there for the Skill Summit, and a part of this skilling thing, it was suggested during that program that Catch Them Young, inculcate skills in the school education, and the NEP has addressed to some extent that thing. So we will love to listen details from Mr. Verma. Over to you.
Thank you, Atulji. Good morning to everyone. Dandir Vikram Singh, co-chair, FICCI Rajasthan State Council. Mr. Omar from UNESCO, Lieutenant General Surinder Kulkarni ji from Mayo College, GK Prabhuji from Manipal University, and also Mr. Sunil Yadav from FICCI. So first of all, I would like to thank FICCI for inviting me again, and it's also a pleasure to be part of this webinar and sharing some of my thoughts on NEP. I would also like to keep it slightly more informative, and I would also like to add some of the point of view which we have as an organization as PwC as well. So let me share my presentation. So while I share the presentation, let me also make it clear that if you look at the new NEP, this is something which has actually taking us into completely a new era, which was maybe earlier policies. I'm not saying that none of them were progressive or not modern, but definitely if you look at NEP 2020, it is ushering us into a completely new era. So is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. It is visible.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just take first look at what is it? What are the new things which is coming in, which is there in NEP 2020? So if you look at NEP 2020, the key principles which has been adopted in NEP 2020, it is looking at equity and inclusion, and which is a cornerstone for even the earlier education policies as well. But when we look at equity and inclusion, I would say the focuses have shifted specifically to the society, or I would say socio-economic aspects compared to what it was earlier in terms of looking at vulnerable sections of society in terms of caste, tribes, and all that. But now it is very clearly more expansive in terms of looking at the socio-economic parameters, the physical disabilities. All of these things are included into the NEP 2020. The other key thing which we should be looking at is looking at that multidisciplinary aspect. It's not saying that you need to study a certain kind of programs, arts, humanities, science, but it's also expanding itself into newer areas, which is including sports, vocation, etc. And that also brings us to the point, because it is also telling us to look at a direction where there is a possibility that the learning is a lifelong activity, and it's just not that we achieve a certain degree or a certification and we stop there. It's a lifelong journey for us, and that's where the flexibility which is being provided in terms of learners to choose their learning pathways. So we could actually be taking up arts or humanities, but we are not getting siloed into that, and our ability to move into some other areas which is may not be in that particular stream of studies which we were pursuing earlier is possible, and that's where the credit-based systems are also coming in. So one of the other clear shift which is happening is on how we are looking at a conceptual learning and not just a rote learning, which is also getting reflected in the way the assessment are going to be looked at in future. So similarly, the few other areas, which is like strengthening teachers, creating a diversity in this entire pedagogy and policy itself, looking at how, though some of these things have gone into a lot of debate in the public forums in terms of whether it is a three-language prescription, or if we look at also the traditional mode of education. So all of these are, I would say, closely knit within NEP 2020. And one of the beauty which I would say is in that it is not very prescriptive. It's largely providing that flexibility to approach a, or adopt a process which you may take to implement it. So, and that is something which is also getting reflected also in the evolving policy paradigm which they have talking about in terms of regular assessment, course corrections, and also adding on to the policy as we go along in its implementation. The last one, which I would like to also emphasis on, it's also talking about the kind of partnerships which is required, which is between the not-for-profit entities, the private sector, the community at large, and also I would say that in the current situation when I'm part of this FICCI program, I would say that the industry bodies like FICCI have a greater role to play in this entire implementation aspect when it comes to NEP. One encompassing theme which is across there in that NEP is the digital technology or technology itself. And since we are, and Randeep Vikram Singh very aptly summed it up when he was talking about how the COVID has impacted that entire education across the globe, and how education institutions are finding newer ways to reach to students and make it in terms of that learning void which has been created because of COVID is being addressed. So the technology, both in delivery and monitoring how we are proceeding in terms of NEP 2020, is going to play a greater role in its implementation. So few areas which is very, very path breaking. One of the areas I will try to cover few of the areas because NEP is so vast. I'm not able to cover an entire thing as part of this discussion, but I would like to cover some of the areas which is very path breaking. And one of them is definitely the early child care and education. And it is not that it is something which is very new. It has been talked about earlier, but I would say that it has been brought to the core in terms of as the foundation which we are laying for the education. And it's recognized now that the age which we are talking about, 3 to 6 years, is one of the period when the child is actually able to learn so many things. And if it is exposed to the right kind of environment, that cognitive development of the brain is happening much, much faster than what it happens at the later part of the childhood. And that's where I think it's a challenge. And it's also an opportunity for all of us to look at how that ECC, which is brought into the core of the NEP, is something which is getting implemented in right earnest. It's not that it was not there in focus earlier, but definitely NEP is bringing it into the core of that entire education focus. So what are some of the key reform initiatives which is coming in the ECCE? We need to understand that most of the urban areas today, you would find the kindergarten schools, play schools, all of these, mostly in the private sector, is filling this entire space. And though government, and I would say when I say government, the state governments, central government, and also even the local self-governments have put in a lot of resources and thought into the preschools, but still it is being dominated largely by the private players. And that's where I think there is an element, because this is an element which is that 3 to 6 years is something which is not falling within the RTE, that is the right to education, and which is not in a regulated space. And that also has led to mostly the private players having a major role to play there. And that also has meant there is a divide in terms of, I would say, that urban-rural divide, haves and have-nots kind of a divide in terms of somebody who's able to afford that kind of schools. So that's also has happened. And there are different surveys and studies which has been done. And from there, it is clear that at least 1 in 4 children in that age group of 0 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, are not in preschool. And by the time when they are getting into the schools, they are not maybe ready for the class 1 or the grade 1 in the newer system. So if you look at that, universal access is something which is missing. And the NEP talks about different models. It could be standalone Anganwadis, it could be preschools, or co-locating the primary schools. So it's not very prescriptive, but it is also laying down a path on which we could move on. And there is also a talk about creating a curricular and pedagogical framework. In fact, in past, I would say that 3 to 4 years back, because this is also an area which is falling into not so much into the Department of Education till now, and it was largely being looked at by the Department of Women and Child, largely through that ICDS program, through Anganwadi centers network, which is spread across the entire country. So there, the NIPSID, which is a body under Ministry of Women and Child, has also created a framework. So there is also some amount of, I would say, that ambiguity which is going to be there when we are talking about which framework is going to be looked at. But when NEP talks about NCERT also coming up with a curricular pedagogical framework. So those are things which may need to be sorted out as we go along. But there is also, we need to realize that there is a large quality infrastructure and play in this entire ECCE area when we talk about providing a high quality education to children at this level. Because it's not like the classroom play which we have in grade 1 to 10. Even there, I think there is now a lot of changes happening in terms of the teaching tools and pedagogical frameworks which is getting utilized, so that the learning outcomes are derived and not a rote learning happens like what I was talking about in the previous slide. So there is a lot of investment also need to go in. So we are not sure about whether the traditional model, which is extending that Anganwadi centers into the pre-primary schools, would be the right approach. But there would the NEP also is not very prescriptive. So we could always evolve a framework through which this transitioning could happen. And our idea is essentially that before we get into the class 1 or the grade 1, the student is very clearly ready for that class 1 in the primary education space. Looking at Rajasthan, if I look at, this is also a study which is done. And from there, it is evident that close to 1 in 3 children are out of the ECCE network. So essentially, around 33% of children do not go to any pre-primary school in Rajasthan. And if I look at also the spread which is there in terms of balance 2/3, the private and other players, the smaller players, have close to around 1/3 of these students in their schools. And similarly, around 1/3 would be there in the government pre-primary and government primary schools. Why is it that 12% of the age group in the children in the age group 3 to 6 is in primary school, whereas it actually starts after 6 years? But we see that this is not a trend only in Rajasthan, but in many states, because the students have not reached the age of 6, but because they are not finding a way, the parents and others are not finding a way to put them into a pre-primary school, they put them into the primary school itself, though they are underage. And this is something which is a phenomenon which is going to get corrected over a period, because even an age appropriate class is very important. And that's one of the things which is being talked about even in NEP. So the challenges are always going to be there. Do we see that the Anganwadi workers are the ones who are going to actually teach ECC, whether they have the aptitude, skills and competencies to do that, whether this would need to be maybe clubbed with a primary school so that it is taking care of that entire education part, whereas the care part or the nutrition part or the health part is something which is going to stay with the Department of Women and Child Development. So there is a lot of convergence and coordination requirement which is going to be there in this entire implementation. But this is a challenge which I feel that definitely the private sector players who are already doing well in this segment will have a larger role to play. If the governments adopt a principle of co-opting them to partner in these transitioning, which is going to happen over the next 10 years, is going to be much more smoother, I would say, transition compared to if we are only looking at a government-led model. So that's something which we could debate later. So some of the other reform measures in the school education, which is very clearly, as I was telling earlier, in terms of making it multidisciplinary, bringing in that 21st century skill set, integrating technology and enabled pedagogy, which is going to be there from 6 to 12, bringing the vocational education into the school space. All of these is largely leading to a kind of holistic development of the children in the school education. And some of the initiatives which has been done, and I would like to maybe call out Rajasthan Adarsh Vidyalaya Yojana, which has been getting implemented in Rajasthan. So it has actually led to the targeted approach which has been put in Adarsh Vidyalaya Yojana, has actually led to the teacher vacancies dropping, improvement in the core subject performance from what it was in 2014. And these journeys are like very, very small steps. And it is not like overnight you would be able to achieve it. But these are definitely large achievements when we look at in the context of education. And it was also good to see that Rajasthan, in fact, actually got into the top 5 in the National Assessment Survey, which was done in 2018, whereas it was around 24th position in 2014. So it's very clearly indicating that if there is a focus which is put on some of these aspects, it's actually going to lead to a lot of, I would say, successful outcomes in shorter period. And when we're talking about 2014 to 2018, it's just 4 years in which we were able to achieve it. Some of the other areas which I would like to talk about is in the vocational education and also the higher education reform. So let me first start with the vocational education. So if you see, the vocational education is something which is proposed to be implemented from class 6 onwards. It's not that you are going to actually have a skill certification which is going to happen in class 6, but depending upon the local context and also the interest of the students, the fun learning of different vocational roles, or making them aware about different opportunities which is there in the job market. Those are the kind of things which is going to happen during this period. That's the formative year when you are talking about 6 to 9 maybe. But already many states and many central government institutions have already started putting in effort to bring in that vocational education into the school. And that's where I think some of these changes which is being suggested by NEP is in very, very right direction. And that's something which is going to take us more, I would say, in focused manner to make that vocational education also aspirational. So Atulji was talking about that I was part of the Skill Summit earlier. So there, in fact, we discussed in great detail about how the vocationalization of schools is required. And that's something which is very clearly getting reflected in NEP as well. And this is something which is definitely going to make that vocational education aspirational, rather than without any rhyme or reason running after degrees and certifications, which do not lead to a meaningful kind of an employment. That awareness and some amount of aptitude which is getting developed during the school education about this entire vocational part is something which is very important. And that's something which is getting definitely reflected in NEP. Now I would like to get into the higher education reforms, some of the things which has been done. Just before that, I would like to also talk about Rajasthan. In fact, has been one of the leading state when it comes to the skills and vocational education focus. In fact, it was one of the first state to actually bring in that convergence through setting up Rajasthan State Livelihood Development Company, RSLDC. And that's something which has actually been path-breaking, and many other states have followed through. And similarly, the skill university which has been created by Rajasthan ILD Skills University is one of the first in the country in terms of a government skill university coming into place. So Rajasthan has actually done quite a bit of work on this space, and I would believe that NEP is again going to give that push which is required for the state. So talking about the higher education reforms, so very clearly the NEP is looking at a kind of more holistic approach to that entire higher education. It's talking about international collaborations, bringing in international higher education universities into India. It's also talking about the entire GER, which is basically in the range of 25 to 30%, depending upon which state you are. So that going up to around 50%. So there is definitely a huge push on the numbers, but it is also prescribing a lot of measures to bring in that quality into the entire higher education. And when we talk about quality into the higher education, the research is one component which has been given a lot of focus as part of this NEP. And it's also talking about what kind of partnerships which we need to do so that these research are more applied research. And this is not just academic research, which is not so much meaningful to the society. And that's something which is very, very important also in the context that we are talking about the industry academia collaboration, how accreditation and affiliation processes are going to change so that there is more quality into the higher education. And NEP also provides for setting up newer institutions that would see a lot of change which is going to happen, I would see, in the entire higher education landscape in next few years. So let's look at some of the numbers which we have here. If you look at Rajasthan, the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education is close to around 23 to 24%. At India level, it's around 26.3%. And even the more so advanced kind of states also have not kind of GER which is closer to the 50%. So 50% is definitely something which is very aspirational. But we also need to understand that the kind of infrastructure, the kind of number of seats, colleges, which would be required if we need to go to the 50%. So that's also a huge ask in terms of when we are talking about the 10-year span which we are looking at. So the quality focus which is there in the higher education is something which needs to be looked at very, very seriously. So if you look at Rajasthan today, so we already have a lot of institutes, I would say four government, two government institute and two private institute who have already broken into the top 100 in the NIRF ranking. And similarly, if I look at NAC accreditation, I would not say it's very encouraging, but that's something which which would happen over a period of time as higher education institutions are trying to, I would say, reinvent themselves. And this is something which is going to happen in the context of COVID itself, because there is a large Indian student population which used to go out for studies, for undergrad studies, and also for the post-graduation studies, which is something which is going to come down. As per our estimate, it is definitely going to come down by at least 40 to 50%. So that would mean that there is an additional requirement of number of seats to go up in many of these in the shorter to medium term in most of our universities. And that's something which is important in terms of when the students are going to actually try to choose those universities, the accredited universities. So currently, if I look at Rajasthan, you only have around 29% of the universities who are accredited, NAC accredited. And colleges, if you look at, there are only 8% colleges who are accredited. Whereas the NEP very clearly looks at that entire national accreditation policy would lead to, in next 15 years, all colleges getting accredited and granting automatic vision. If we need to achieve incremental improvement, which is going to make us reach there, but it would need definitely a significant leap here. So
Mr. Mishra, I would request you to please conclude. We are getting slightly delayed.
Keeping the time in mind, I'm just trying to conclude also that when we talk about an NEP implementation, just conclude in 1 minute. So it's a collective effort which is needed. Governments, the QP provider, the for-profit and not-for-profit partners, accreditation bodies, industry associations like FICCI, the industry, the community at large. All of us need to play a role in this entire implementation. So with that, I would conclude and Sorry, Atulji, I slightly went beyond the time which was given to me. Thank you.
In fact, it was a comprehensive overview with the comparative analysis of Rajasthan and the national pictures, and good to note that we are doing better in many of the aspects related to skill development. Now I would request Mr. Ma'am Omar Diop, Program Specialist and Chief of Section Education, UNESCO New Delhi office. And this is basically a cluster office which caters to Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Over to you, Mr. Diop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atul, and thank you very much also, Mr. Randir Singh. Would like to really thank FICCI for giving us this opportunity to participate in this audience. And of course, I really enjoyed the presentation from Mr. Ashok Varma on the NEP. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to everybody here virtually gathered. I'm delighted to be with you all, and I hope everyone watching this is in good health. I will focus my talk today on the features of education, the features of education. I said the features with S, plural, not the feature, but several features. I'll explain why. I'll begin with some kind of context by highlighting the importance of the Agenda 2030. In his opening remarks, the co-chairman of the FICCI Rajasthan spoke about the SDG 4 and the role it plays. So what is the Agenda 2030? It's a set of 17 goals, which are called the Sustainable Development Goals, and it has 169 targets. And it was adopted by the countries, so India, all the countries from the world, and by the head of the state of the government on the 25th September 2015 at the special United Nations summit, and there was also at the Incheon Declaration. So the agenda, when we talk about Agenda 2030, is a commitment by these countries to eradicate poverty and achieve sustainable development by 2030. So right now we are in 2020, and we are 10 years left to eradicate, let's say, poverty worldwide. This is the commitment that our government and the member states and the head of the states have made back in 2015. And this globally shared concern for sustainability implies a universal agenda relevant to all societies, both in the global north and the global south. Certainly, shared values and common policies are the basis for sustainable development and sustaining peace. In fact, the recognition is what drove the adoption of the universal and transformative agenda for sustainable development with 5 dimensions at its core. So the people, prosperity, planet, partnership, and peace. 5 P's. People, because we want to end poverty, hunger, and all forms, in the forms of all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment. Planet, of course, highlights the environment, to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption, production, and you name it. Prosperity aspect is aimed at ensuring that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling life, and the economic, social, and technological progress that occurs in harmony with the nature. Peace, which is a very important constituent of this 5 P's, promotes the intention to foster peaceful and just and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. There can be no sustainable development without peace and no peace without sustainable development. Partnership, and I think it was emphasized by my predecessor, it describes the collective and collaborative approach which is required to implement the goals and achieve the universal engagement that is essential for the achievement of all the SDGs. So we have 17 of them. But you will agree with me that education is quite central, and education is explicitly formulated as a standalone goal on the goal number 4, Sustainable Development Goal 4. But at the same time, numerous education-related targets and indicators are also contained in all the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, education is both a goal in itself, and a means for attaining all the other SDGs. It is not only an integral part of the Sustainable Development Agenda, but also a key enabler for that. I just wanted to set that context. So if we enable every child and adult to fulfill their learning goals, it can start a virtuous cycle and help address many interconnected problems. For instance, when you talk about reduced poverty, and here I would like to tell you that UNESCO has estimated that each extra year of schooling of anybody is associated with an increased earning of up to 10% in the wage that you usually earn. It can reduce also maternal death. It reduces child mortality too, because a child born to a mother who can read is estimated to be 50% more likely to live beyond the age of 5. It can turn the tide on the health issues. For example, let's say on HIV. In this area, research suggests that women with post-primary education are 5 times more likely to be knowledgeable about HIV and AIDS, and those are women who are illiterate. What these simple facts tell us is that education is a foundation for development, and therefore progress in education is the lever for making tremendous gains on all other development indicators. So when we talk about the people in Rajasthan, I mean, there are several indicators, right? It's not only the education, but education is going to be quite central to that, and it is going to be the foundation of that development. This is what the facts tell us. We have established that education is the critical to the achievement of these goals, but what is the future of education and learning? Is the relevance, nature, structure of education the same today as compared to what it was 2 or 5 decades ago? I mean, this is even far. We can just say a year ago, is education looking the same? No, at all. Certainly, education and learning are constantly changing, and there are many reasons for this. With accelerated climate change, the fragility of our planet is becoming more and more apparent, and persistent inequalities, social fragmentation, political extremism are bringing many societies to a point of crisis. Advances in digital communication, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology have great potentials, but also raise serious ethical and governance concerns. Therefore, the promise of innovation and technological change may not always be a positive one. UNESCO has the tradition of reinventioning education at key historical junctures of societal transformation. This helps in framing the bigger picture, because a lot of people will then focus, for example, the context right now is the COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19. But what is the bigger picture? Can we go outside of that issue and then look at the very bigger picture and then put ourselves in perspective? Because the health system will most likely come out with solutions in solving probably this virus, and there are some hopes in some vaccines. But this would help us to frame the bigger picture questions of the type of society we aspire to create from the perspective of our common humanity, and to explore the implication for how we understand and approach education and learning. The first exercise of this kind, for example, in UNESCO was undertaken in the 1970s, and it resulted to the 4 report, which was issued in 1972, that promoted the concept of learning to be. The next instance was in the mid-90s with the Delors Commission report, which came out with its report, Learning the Treasure Within, and it was emphasizing a more humanistic and integrated approach to the multiple function of education as a fundamental right and public good. And they talked about 4 things: learning to be, learning to do, learning to know, and learning to live together. And now, in 2020, we initiated one, what we call the Features of Education Initiative. It was initiated in past September 2019. And we are exploring the concept of learning to now become, learning to become. reflecting a philosophical line and social thinking that emphasizes potential, rejects determinism, and embrace openness to the new. And openness to the new, now we can even talk about new normal because COVID-19 has passed, has been there. More importantly, it acknowledges the challenge that humanity needs to become something it has not yet become. This ongoing global debate, which is led by UNESCO, of course, and on how education and learning might need to be retaught in a world of increasing complexity, uncertainty, precarity. This initiative is called the Futures of Education Initiative. It is important to note the plural futures, an acknowledgement that many parallel and diverse possible futures may exist. There is not only one sole future possible, but there are many of them which are possibles. And we are looking at the horizon 2050. From now, 2020, 30 years beyond, we are trying to imagine that society and to imagine that education, what it would look like. This initiative relies on a broad, open, consultative process that involves youth, educators, civil society, governments, business, and other stakeholders. The work will be guided by a high-level international commission of thought leaders from diverse fields and different regions of the world. In November 2021, the commission will publish a report designed to share a forward-looking vision of what education and learning might yet become and offer a policy agenda. UNESCO's Futures of Education Initiative is an attempt to rethink education and help shape the future. The initiative is catalyzing a global debate on how education, learning, knowledge need to be reimagined in a world of I described earlier. So all global visioning exercises must eventually be tied to local realities. So therefore, it is important for us to ask, how should education in India improve in the future? And a lot have been said, and I'm very happy to hear that this policy is a holistic policy, and it was inclusive in its approach. It took 34 years to come to this point. And we are happy also that it is not prescriptible. It shouldn't be prescriptible. It should lay the vision and give the inspirations, aspirations, so that people can come with frameworks in order to implement it. And since the introduction of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and the Rights to Education Act, India has improved access tremendously, but the quality of education still needs some improvement. Improving education quality would require focusing on issues related to teachers, classroom processes, assessment and evaluation of students' learning, school infrastructure, and effectiveness and community participation. Clearly, one important aspect of education that we must improve upon is quality in all its forms. But while we tackle the quality of education, we must also keep our eyes on the moving target, the changing nature of education due to the changing nature of work. The future of work also we must be brought in so that we can match whatever citizen we are preparing for the world of work. Finally, I do not think this address would be complete without addressing the elephant in the room, this COVID-19 and its impact that all of us are facing. As you are aware, COVID-19 has put all of us in an unprecedented situation and has overturned all institutional settings across the world. One of the most affected audience are the young children, teachers, and those involved in education system across the globe. This pandemic has affected educational system worldwide, leading to the widespread closures of schools and universities. Latest data show that 1.2 billion learners have been affected due to school closures in response to this COVID-19. So that brought some new issues that were called, some of them were called, for example, the most prominent was called the digital divide. People are talking about the digital divide because education has gone now online and the distance education, and of course it's just a response to a situation which is happening right now, and then of course this situation will not be the same in the future. Now, what is the future of this classroom? Will we have a physical classroom in the future? Of course, we will continue to have physical classrooms. And then also people complained about the access to connectivity. I was reading on the paper yesterday that one survey highlighted that 94% kids surveyed in 4 states in India didn't have internet access. Be it access to a smartphone or be it access to an online education online provider. So that are raising serious issues, and I think this national education policy now is paving the way for partnership. Public-private partnership is important, and because education is a right. So a right which is not negotiable. Education is a right, so the public offer should be there, and I'm thinking that the government should go one step beyond and then enhance that private-public partnership by bringing in the infrastructure issue. Infrastructure meaning making sure that connectivity is all over the territory, but then at the same time, people can access smartphones and then laptops. There are a lot of surveys that pointed out that even the teachers themselves didn't have laptops. Most of them worked on smartphones. So there are also some other studies that showed that most of the teachers were above the age 55. So causing a serious issue of digital literacy and all these kind of things. So what do we do to address those kind of things? And I think this audience would gain, of course, in reflecting in those. Moving forward and keeping the future of education in mind, I'm sure that individuals and institutions in this domain can come together to share similar initiatives like that of UNESCO, of course, and discuss the impact they are creating and also build new capabilities. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Omar, for that perspective. And rightly said, education is a right and it's non-negotiable. So it's interest that all the stakeholders come together and work towards realization of this. I would now request Lieutenant General Surendra Kulkarni, Director of Mio College, Ajmer, for his address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. Thank you, Thakur Randir Vikram Singh ji, for inviting me. Greetings to all panel members and all those present at the webinar. Keeping time in mind, I'll get straight to the core of the issue. First and foremost, the education policy is a vision document. It's not a plan for execution. Second thing, because education is a concurrent subject, it requires buy-in from respective state governments. Otherwise, it can take a long time to come together like the GST. Then, as all of you would be familiar, many enabling institutional frameworks have to be created or some have to be remodeled to come into alignment with the education policy. All this takes time, and time is of essence in this whole process. The important thing is that the scope for universal education has been substantially widened to now cover from the age group of 3 to 18. And this broadly covers 4 facets: the facilities that we provide, the faculty that we have, the curriculum, and the pedagogy. The curriculum and pedagogy have got a lot of attention in the policy. But these are the soft portions and are relatively easier to arrange and implement. The facilities and faculty require both financial and human capital. And such investments always need a lot of time to fructify even after we commit ourselves wholly to it. Now, what are some of the enabling structures? I'll quickly go through because there are so many, you'll wonder when will it happen. For early childhood education, we are going to have a national curricular and pedagogical framework to be drafted by NCERT. There will be a revision of the national curriculum framework for school education and the national curriculum framework for teacher education to be done by 2021. There will be census assessments at key stages at grade 3, 5, and 8. And this is separate from the boards that will be held for class 10 and 12. Then a transformation of the assessment system has to be made based on guidelines prepared by the NCRT in consultation with state SCRTs, boards of assessment, and what they're now going to call PARAK, or the Performance Assessment Review and Analysis of Knowledge for Holistic Development Framework. A national assessment center will bring about greater synergy in board exams to be conducted by various boards. And a national testing agency will offer a high quality common aptitude test so that the need for coaching classes may go away. There are many more things to come up. Setting up a state school standards authority, school quality assessment and accreditation frameworks, and I can go on and on. But I'll just come back to this national testing agency because it has an impact on Rajasthan. A large part of the economy around Kota rests on coaching centers that prepare students for various entrance examinations. If this national testing agency comes up with an aptitude test, and if it's truly an aptitude test, then no preparation will help. And therefore, this could have serious repercussions on the economy of Kota, and people in Rajasthan may like to look at it. There is also talk of pairing private and government schools with one private school and one government school. This twinning assumes that there will be equal numbers of private schools and government schools. Otherwise, how will it happen? Now, whereas they have said is that all these assessment surveys and all will be accredited on a common criteria at state level. What then happens to trans-states boards like the IB or the CBSE or the CISSE? There are question marks on this. There is also a direction to prepare a new, apart from the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education by 2021, a Higher Education Regulatory Council has to be formed, which was mentioned by Mr. Verma. So these two have to have a forward-backward linkage. And how will this be done needs amplification. And this is where PwC or the FICCI groups can help in. You all would be familiar that at Delhi, there is an organization called FICCI Arise, which works with FICCI. And of course, we are members of that from our school. But that's an advocacy body which has been doing a lot of good work. Similarly, I think within Rajasthan, there may be a case for more schools or more promoters to join FICCI Arise so that a national holistic policy advocacy can take place. There is a need to set up national professional standards for teachers by 2022. Why I'm highlighting all this is because all this itself will take time. All this requires coming to some sort of consensus, and invariably you will find that this is a challenge. Plus, there is talk of pooling in schooling, like you have industrial SEZs. They're calling it a special education zone, that to have SEZs in states so that you could have common infrastructure that can be used, utilize the unutilized capacity of schools, especially day schools, as Samajik Chetna Kendras, and use these clusters for resource sharing. Similarly, they want to segregate certain aspects, like the state education department should only deal with policy, the Directorate of Education only look after operations, and the SCRT to look after academics, and the State School Standards Authority to set up the common standards. So therefore, what the main point I would like to make, and I'm saying this from a school perspective up to secondary education, that there is much to be done. Your catchment area is going to expand a lot if you go down to age group of 3. You need to provide them with trained people in order to help the children to acquire the foundation level literacy and numeracy skills. And the target given for this is by the year 2025. So if you see, you're really left with about 4 years or so, 4.5 years. I think it's a very ambitious plan. So if a state like Rajasthan wishes to leverage this, then, and this is there in the policy, you need to reach out to retired teachers, other professionals in their various fields who may have time on their hands, volunteers, even university students to come in and pitch in on a part-time basis. Only then will you make up these numbers. So that's one major issue for Rajasthan. The second major issue for Rajasthan is today Rajasthan has the maximum number of universities in the country. And yet, as Mr. Verma pointed out, the GER is lower than the national average. Just the other day, the MHRD minister has said that no university will be allowed to affiliate more than 300 colleges. Now, if you decide how much should be the strength of each college, multiplied by 300, multiply that to create the number of universities you need in Rajasthan to have the GER of 50% as you go forward, is something that needs to be really looked at carefully. So as I said, this is so far only a vision document. It is not a plan. Translating into a plan will be the making of it as a success or otherwise. The curriculum and pedagogy portions of it will succeed, no problem. In fact, the progressive schools are already onto it. And others will catch up. I have no worry on that count. But definitely the structures that are required to be put into place, the facilities that need to be provided to students, the minimum necessary infrastructure facilities, and more importantly, the suitably trained faculty, we have a lot of work to do in this. So I think, keeping time in mind, I will leave it here. If there are questions, I'll take them on later. So thank you, Mr. Sharma, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, for bringing some practical issues on the table. And now I would request Dr. G.K. Prabhu, President of Manipal University, Jaipur, for his address. Over to you.
Okay, good afternoon. And first of all, thank you very much for FICCI Rajasthan for giving us an opportunity to come here and discuss on the very important topic. And I also convey my greetings to all my panelists. And very interestingly, all the different points are being deliberated, and being in the last person in this panel. So, and also considering the time frame. So let me bring only a few points rather than highlighting all the features of NEP, which is being very elaborated, given by Mr. Ashok Vermaji. Okay, so now, yes, everybody is about NEP. Lot of webinars in the different platforms are going, and very good effort from the different stakeholders, regulatory bodies, the government officials to create that awareness for various stakeholders, and very well accepted by many areas. Now it is an important thing for us, it is in the implementation. And even in the implementation, we have to invite all the stakeholders rather than a higher education institution sitting idle and making that kind of a change. So in my opinion, for the best ever implementation of this NEP, the curriculum must be revisited and restructured. Few universities have their ability and the flexibility to do it. And maybe there are some universities, some colleges, they may look for the affiliated colleges. But in my opinion, for a best ever implementation of an NEP, so the curriculum must be competent, the curriculum must be relevant, the curriculum must be flexible, and there must be fun part in the teaching learning. So when I talk about the competence, whether our curriculum is a very competent, it means, let us take one program as an engineering, and in the engineering, let us say if it is a mechanical engineering, after he finishes his mechanical engineering and the degree is awarded, whether that candidate is confident in giving or in solving any engineering problem relevant to his own domain knowledge, like mechanical engineering. whether that competence is built or not. And if it is not, and if it's not confidence, it means that we may have to look into the building at the competent curriculum in the implementation. The second part is about the relevancy. So many times when we do that, and it becomes a very painful for all the higher education institution, when the placement data comes. Sometimes they say that 75% of the engineering graduates are not employable. It really is a painful situation for all the higher education institution and the university. That means in these 4 years or 5 years of an engineering, whether that the person is not reliable, so that means the relevancy is not there. And that is the second very important point that we need to address. The third point is the flexible. And this flexibility that I will discuss in detail as a topic. But the fourth very important point is a fun part. Do the students really love to come to the class? Whether there is a fun part in teaching. Of course, there is a lot of fun part which happens in the campus. And that is the reason that the students are very eager to come for the universities. But inside the classroom, is there any kind of a fun part? And if we say that attendance is not a compulsion, how many students will come to the class and still attend? And this is the bigger question mark for all of us. And fun part usually comes if there is an experiential learning. Do we really give that kind of an experiential learning part to it? And everybody knows if you enjoy in doing it, and you will learn faster. And that is the competence that we need to bring it. And definitely NEP is really a hopeful for all of us to address all these issues. So let me address only one point and then I will close, and which is nothing but is a flexibility. And this NEP gives something, a very interesting part, which is called as a multiple entry and multiple exit policy. Very, very interesting. Okay, see, for example, at the time of, again, being as an engineer, I will take as an engineering as an example, but it will be hopeful and applicable for all the other academic programs too. We do counseling and we admit these students into the different programs. Whether it is a truly counseling or it is only a seat matrix distribution. Even if you do an effort in counseling, what means? Whether that particular child has an aptitude towards a particular program or not. That is not at all being done. Even if you do it, everybody looks for a particular program, considering is the job prospectus. Yes, it is a very important. After learning, everybody wants to earn by joining a particular job. But whether it is only that is the criteria to join a particular program, and after joining, and as a vice chancellor, I will tell you, if I ask my students at the end of the first year or a second year, beta, are you happy with these kind of programs? More than 80% of the students would say, sir, no. That means there was no proper counseling which happened. And in case if there is a painful, that means if some students would like to go out from that, it is called as a dropout. And the dropout is a very, very painful situation in any education. But this NEP gives something very interesting. Let us say for 4 years of an engineering. If somebody would like to drop at the first year of an engineering, we can give him diploma and he can go back. If somebody wants to drop at the second year, we can give an advanced diploma that the child can go out. If somebody wants to drop at the third year, we can give as a BSc engineering and then he can go out. At the fourth year, and of course, definitely he will get an engineering degree and then he will go out. Okay, now the question is, at the end of the fourth year, there would be something else that which we can do it. That means even in the second and third year and fourth year, if we can introduce a little bit more on the research, the engineering can lead into, one is for the industry practice and another is for the research track. So that means there is a corporate track and then there is a research track which we can do it, and that is the flexibility NEP brings. And if somebody goes with the research track, and if there is a little more research component is being attached, it depends upon the availability, we can give a B.Tech honors. And with this B.Tech honors, he can directly jump into the PhD program without having the master's program. And if it is a 4 years of an engineering, he can do a master's, which is a 1 year master's. So the master's can also be a 2 years or it can be 1 year. And as everybody knows, that concept of MPhil has completely gone. And this is the flexibility this NEP gives. Now the question for all of us, it is the design of this curriculum in each year. For example, at the end of the first year, if somebody goes, it not like that. The first year curriculum must also be designed in such a way that there would be some definite skills are available. Without giving the skills, and if you allow them to go with the diploma, what that child can do. Second year, if somebody wants to go with an advanced diploma, we need to put some kind of an occasional programs and courses so that he will go with some kind of an advanced skills and it will be useful for him. And NEP will also give a flexibility after dropping out. And after some time, if that person wants to come back and giving that kind of a credits back into the institution, and if he continues that degree, it is a possibility to do that. And that is the great flexibility this NEP has. And it is all left to us to design the curriculum accordingly. It is not only, and while designing the curriculum, we need to have all the stakeholders. And the industry input is a very, very important. And being as a multidisciplinary universities, we need to introduce some arts course, some science course, some humanities, and maybe some languages. All these things will be added together and we need to move forward. So we are very hopeful and we are very excited to make this kind of a change. And being as a higher education university and all, now it is also left to us to design an excellent teacher program. Like the NEP says that moving forward, the teacher program, the B.Ed is a 4 years program. And it is not that at the end of the third year BA or a BCom, whether the candidate will decide, no, I will do 1 year B.Ed or a 2 year B.Ed and become a teacher. No, to become a teacher, the candidate has to decide much earlier. And it is a 4 years program. And the school's education, I think we need to interact with them and understand what is the things to be required. And those curriculum must also be developed so that the teacher education must also be an excellent, so that with that skills, they will go to the schools and those kids learned by these teachers, they will come for the higher education. It would be better for higher education institutions like universities like. So I would be very happy to interact and collaborate with the many industries and learn from what is the requirement and design the curriculum accordingly. So that is the thing. So again, I'll repeat, for an NEP implementation, a competent curriculum, a relevant curriculum, a flexible curriculum, and let us add fun in learning. And this fun component comes by introducing many experiential learning and let them enjoy and learn from it. So I will stop, Atulji, at this particular point and would be very happy to interact with the other members in case if there is any specific questions. Once again, I thank FICCI Rajasthan and other co-panelists for interacting with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhu. And now I would request the participants, if there are any questions, you can please raise your hand. We will unmute you. You can briefly introduce yourself and ask your question. In fact, we had some advanced questions also that have come to us, but by and large, all of them are addressed. Some are more of a nature of suggestion, but then that is also fine. With regards to school education, there is a question. We have the pre-primary stage has been incorporated in national education policy, but the predominantly, if we leave aside the urban schools or semi-urban schools, most of the schools lack the infrastructure for incorporating this component. And Lieutenant General Kulkarni has also pointed out towards this thing. So if someone would like to comment how it would be addressed probably in times to come. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, you would like to comment on this? You have already mentioned this thing.
On the issue of creating infrastructure in rural areas, right?
Yes.
You see, it can come up through three different tracks. One, of course, the government decides that because of the digital advantages that we have, we decentralize education and even commerce to the places where people live. Because today you can do online commerce also, you can do online business also, you can manufacture locally, and you may be a handicraft person, you can export from there. You can be a farmer, you can find out the price in the main mandi in the state capital, things like that. So that is one track. So the government will have a role to play, and it will have to start with the government, because when the government does it, private players will find, yes, that there is some advantage in this, but at the end of the day, even not-for-profits have to make some operating profits to run the school. So then they will be attracted to come and do it there. The third is the CSR route, where some people, some of the private players have their plants and all in very remote areas, and therefore they have a bit of a township there. And in the process, I'll give you an example. In Rajasthan, the Singaniyas have this place in Gotan, which is a small place, but because their factory is there, they have a huge school, residential school next to part of the complex. So there they can provide both high quality education to their factory workers and to the people from nearby villages, etc. So this will have to be a three-track approach, and cannot be left either to the government alone or to the private sector alone. As I said, they will go by the numbers. And the third, of course, is the CSR route. If you have this, it can't happen everywhere, but at a number of places it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. There is one more question that is there. This is about the language. They say it will be in local language, but over a period of time, English has been associated as aspirational language for teaching among the rural folks also. Now, what does this mean? This is compulsorily moving to Hindi for class 1 to 5 everywhere, or it is optional?
You see, what the policy says should be read carefully. It says it's your mother tongue or your home language or whichever language you are comfortable with. But I would like to make an important distinction here, is between English as a medium of instruction and English as a language to be learnt. The need to learn English as a language is not under question. Everybody knows the value of it. And the aspirational part is in knowing English or taking English as a subject or learning it as a language. As far as medium of instruction comes, there is plenty of research to show that children understand and think easiest in the language that they hear repeatedly around them. So it could well be tomorrow, if let us say you have some expats coming to India, they may be used to speaking in English. For them, their home language is English. For others, it may be the local one. In Rajasthan itself, there could be different languages in different parts of the state, which is, you can call the home language. So therefore, that option to study in that home language must be there. But in India, that one home language, as you're saying, Hindi, cannot be imposed. The language spoken in, say, in Udaipur and the language spoken in Jodhpur in Rajasthan is not the same at home. Seen. So therefore, that flexibility has to be given as a choice. Similarly, there are some international curriculums which are run in India. There are some employees who have transferable jobs. There are corporates who are, say, working in Rajasthan whose staff will have transferable jobs. So their problem is what does the child do when he goes to the next location? And hence, a balanced, mature look will have to be taken by the governments, and certain amount of leeway and latitude will have to be given. And sometimes in the same school, you may be having a section in which the medium of instruction, even at lower classes, happens to be English by chance. And in some, it's a local language. In third section, it may be Hindi. I'll give you an example. Mayo College, we get a lot of children from Punjab. So we even offer Punjabi as a third language. Seen. So if tomorrow there was enough traction to have a section full, and we could have taught, say, Punjabi to the younger children even as a medium of instruction for up to some point. So this should be seen not as a political issue, but as out of two parts, as I said, the aspirational, which is to know English, so that's as a subject, and the other is a medium of instruction, which, as I said, research shows is best done in the language that a child hears around him or her. So that is such a wide spectrum in India that any common imposition will only be detrimental. And let me give you examples of states like UP and others who have tried it earlier, have gone back on their own policy now, realize it's not a good idea to impose this language.
Thank you. There is one question in the chat box for Dr. Prabhu. How do you think NEP will help in reducing unemployment?
Yeah, so in my opinion, to some extent, yes, because as I told you, the more and more relevant and more and skill-oriented learning which happens, and that will definitely address, because today jobs are there, jobs are definitely there, but only one thing is our students are not, what you say, available at that particular level. The skills may not be there. So when we deal with this, even again is an engineering, there is a more on vocational courses blending. It has to be there, whether it is in the first year or in the second year. And when you go into the higher semester, of course, it becomes a design and more on slightly on the research. But in the first and second year, if you add a vocational, again, not only for an engineering, even for any other program, let us say if there is a BA in English, when we do it, okay, so there also, if you are in a position to give some kind of a skills which will help them for a life, so that will also be helped. So we are very again hopeful, and those kind of an additional skills which will be a part of the curriculum will definitely help them for the jobs. But when we talk about the jobs, Atulji, again, it is not only the corporate jobs. It is not only the MNCs kind of a job. And there are, and especially when I deal with the Rajasthan, and there is something it is there inside, which is the people from Rajasthan are not only the job seekers, they are the job creators. Okay, so those are something that which we need to identify and train them. So we are very hopeful. My answer is yes.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhu. And now, looking at the time, I would request Mr. Sunil Kumar Yadav, who chairs our Skills and HR Committee and Vice President of Honda Cars, for his vote of thanks. Over to you, Yadav.
Yeah, Mr. Atul, it was indeed a pleasure listening the distinguished learned speakers on this very important subject of future of education. And I will say means we have the very good panel means which brings all the facets for this policy in terms of what it is, what kind of significance this has, what kind of challenges going to have, and how those challenges can be met out. So if I say in brief, what I could gather means with the help of say Mr. Dio, who has very well laid out the background and how the education policy should be in terms of making the good society. And also, it was made very clear by Mr. Kulkarni that this is a vision, and so lot to do. How we should be able to change this concept into the reality is a big challenge. And all the learned speakers, they have put the focus on the various aspect in terms of the challenges, what is required as a suggestion for the making it successful. And everybody has agreed this NEP is going to change a very positive change for the country. And what we need to focus is on the infra, teachers training, and on the curriculum. So I would like to extend the thanks to all the distinguished speakers, as well as the people who have supported these programs like Manipal University, Jaipur, DCM Sriram, Kajaria Ceramics, Mahindra World City, Sri Cements, and really the kind of panel what we have in such a short duration, I think audience must have enjoyed it in terms of getting the glimpse of the policy, as well as what kind of benefits is going to give to the country, and how it can be converted into the implementation mode very effectively. So it will go in a long way. A lot of things can be deliberated and worked out after this session. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Atulji and Rahulji.
Thank you, Mr. Yadav. And with this, we come to the close of the webinar. Thank you, everyone.